My name is Heather Dalton, and my multimedia presentation is going to be on oral history and interviews and the fact that they are critically important to historical research. They not only preserve personal accounts of events and preserve diverse perspectives, but it also gives us firsthand accounts of events that went on. By recording interviews and conducting them, historians actually humanize what is being recorded. You can fill in gaps that are in textbooks and other ways, and you can actually see the person's face and put a human with the story. You can see the emotions, which gives you a deeper understanding of how these events affected people. Additionally, the interviewee can express and reflect on their experience, and sometimes it gives them a chance to think about things in a different way to help themselves heal by sharing the story. Thinking about this assignment, thinking about what I would pick, and when I chose oral histories, the first thing that comes to my mind is Holocaust survivors. This is something that I have had a lot of experience with, meeting with Holocaust survivors in my several years as a history teacher, and seeing their emotions and hearing their stories is something that changes the way an individual can look at and learn about the things that happened during the Holocaust. The U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum holds over 9,000 oral interviews with individuals who have survived the Holocaust. The benefit of this is they are sharing their lives. They are being able to heal themselves, but they are also hoping to prevent others from having to go through this by teaching to younger generation that we don't have to do these things. It shares their ability for what they witnessed. It gives you a firsthand account of what the trauma that these survivors went through. It's one thing to read a book or watch a video or a movie where actors are portraying survivors and what went on during the Holocaust and World War II. It's another thing to sit and listen to these individuals tell their story, share what went on, see the emotions on their face, see that it is real and that it has affected them and is a real human story that needs to be told. It can have a deep effect on the people that are listening to the interview and the oral history, because it is giving them a new perspective of what they are learning. It also can stop misinformation that's out there. The Holocaust deniers, the ones that say, oh, it wasn't that bad. If it was that bad, why are there still people around? Why weren't more people punished? All these things that come out, hearing these oral histories and having these survivor interviews helps put an end to that, because you can see this really did happen to real people. This was not something that is made up. Over the past 12 years, like I said, I have had the honor of meeting and hearing several survivor stories. These people, ladies and gentlemen, that I have met have been a part of the North Carolina program for teachers and educators. It's called Echoes and Reflections, and it is a way to share with North Carolina educators the stories and ways to teach it, because here in North Carolina it is a requirement for middle and high school, and all public schools now have to teach the Holocaust in some way, thanks to a wonderful program called the Giselle Abrams law. So during my past 12 years, I have met several survivors and I have become close to some of them. My very first one that I met, and I have met with him multiple times. I have brought him into the school that I have worked at a couple times and given my students in middle school an actual person that they could interact with and make the connection. Dr. Zev Harel is an amazing man. He has lived an amazing life, and his story is one of the ones off of the Holocaust Museum in the Survivor and Reflections testimony section. His story is one of survival and doing what he had to do to survive. He talks about how his family was forced to live in a ghetto. When he was there for a few weeks, he was forced to work in a brick factory. Then, after a couple weeks, his family was loaded into cattle cars and taken to Auschwitz. From there, he describes the horror of being on the cattle cars, what happens on them, and then arriving at the camp. He describes how his brother, his father, and him were separated from his mother. They went one way, she went one way. He explained how the separating right, left, where it was, if you go this way, you are going straight to the crematorium. If you went this way, you're going to go through a process to be kept and put into a work detail. He had an individual when he was in line that told him, lie about your age. You are a bigger boy, lie about your age. He was 14 at the time, and he told them he was 17, which in reality saved his life. He shares how, as he went through the steps through Auschwitz, he was stripped of his clothing. They had to shower. They had all their hair shaved off. They received their striped uniform, and at the age of 14, he had the number that he would have his life basically ruled by for the next several years tattooed on his arm. He says how he now became a number and was no longer a human. After he spent a week in Auschwitz, him and his brother and his father were loaded back up onto a cattle car and transported to Matheson, where he was there for just a little bit again, kind of like a transfer station, when he was separated from his brother and his father and marched to Biesen, where he would stay until he was liberated on May 5th, 1945. He goes on and he explains all the different aspects of what life in the concentration camp was and all the horrors that he witnessed and he went through and the hard things that he had to do to survive and being separated from his family. He then goes on and shares a little happier note about how after he was liberated, he knew a bunch of languages, and one day he was just resting and an army person came up and asked if anybody knew how to speak a certain language. He knew how to speak it, and from that point on, he became a part of the military as a translator. He then was able to make his way to Israel and then eventually here into the United States from there. He gained his education. He became a doctor. His story is just one that has always stuck with me after I hear him and talk to him personally. One of the things that he will always end every one of his interviews is, it is up to you to learn from what I have told you and to prevent it from happening again. Then he goes on to say, young people, get your education and learn everything you can. To him, giving these interviews and sharing his story is a way to get his story out there for people to understand and learn from. And he wants everybody to learn so that they do not repeat the same mistakes. Another lady that I have met multiple times and heard her story is kind of different than Dr. Harel's. Her name is Sulichinkin, and she was a baby during the Holocaust. So that provides a whole new level of oral history because as a baby, you don't remember really what happened to you. You know once you get older what went on, but when you're a baby and things are happening, you just learn from what people tell you. She was a baby when her parents were moved into a ghetto, and she remembers how she had to be stored under the floor with her mother's hand over her mouth, so that during the searches of the ghetto, none of the soldiers would come in, because during the time then, that ghetto was being emptied of every child under the age of 12. Her mother would hide her, praying and hoping that she would stay quiet so nothing could happen to her. It quickly became where she was the only child in the ghetto, and that raised yet another level of fear, because you can't hide a 3.5-year-old when there's no other children around. She goes on to say how her parents gave her a sleeping potion, placed her in a potato sack, and threw her over the fence of the ghetto to 2 women that were waiting on the other side, who put her on a cart, wheeled her away, and she credits her survival to one of these women, Miriam Schulman, who then would take care of her for the next 3 years. She is one of the fortunate ones who both her parents survived the Holocaust, and Miriam had shown her a picture, and she recognized the 2 there as her parents, but she didn't really know anything else. And just before her 6th birthday, she came around a corner at their farm, and she ran right into her mother. And her mother had come to pick her up and take her to her father. Once they moved through the process to get out of Israel, they were reunited with her father in Havana, Cuba, where they would live until she immigrated to the United States. Her story is one of memories, but also memories that are shared with her from other people. As a 3.5-year-old, you're not going to remember everything that went on. But when you are reunited with people who were there, they can give you an idea of something so that you can look back at it. But the problem is while these stories are wonderful and they're educational and having them recorded is a great thing to have, it also kind of has some drawbacks to it, because you're having these individuals have to relive the experiences they went through. They may be positive and they may be healing them to talk about them, but some of these individuals can't speak everything that happened. So they have to wait, and they will pause, and a lot of times they will say, I can't talk about that part, and then they skip a whole section 2 years later when things have changed even more. They just don't remember it. The trauma of the events have blocked out of their mind. The other thing is that a lot of these survivors are aging. Their dementia is hitting. They are older. They are not remembering exactly what went on. So they are relying on these to not only help them remember their story, but also the story might change some, because as they've gotten older, they have misplaced in their minds some of these things. They've repressed some of this stuff. So it's not actually all possibly true at that point. Which can lead to confusion, because you may hear somebody's story one time and it's one way, and then another time and it's a totally different story. The survivors that I have met want their stories recorded. They want to be able to share them and then never talk about it again. Sully and Dr. Harwell are not those people. They want to go out and share their story in person. But there are others that they want it recorded and they never want to talk about it again. And they never really want to answer questions about what happened again, because it brings up traumatic memories to them. So they get it out and then it's blocked. Like I said with Sully, the younger ones don't always know what actually happened to them. They are now getting the memories recounted to them from other people and then having to go along with that. Without individuals like this sharing their stories, millions of Holocaust survivors would not be willing to share them. There would be more denial because we wouldn't know what actually happened and went on. Photographs, books, movies, all those things are wonderful and educational and help with it, but hearing the firsthand account of individuals who actually live something, nothing can replace that. So we need to remember how important oral histories and interviews are in our understanding and recording of history. Thank you.